Watka Nuarado Sewagoego. Greetings, everyone. Lindsay Jungens Deno Brant de Waxanazre, Gundeke Nini Wageno, Waganyato. Hello, my name is Lindsay Brandt, and I'm from Gundeke, which is the place name for Tyendinaga Mohawk Territory, and I'm a member of the Turtle Clan here in Tyendinaga. I wanted to take a few moments to speak to you about land acknowledgements and what the importance is behind that and the meaning behind that. For myself, when I acknowledge land, I'm not only acknowledging the land and the peoples that are the caretakers of those lands, but also my connection to the earth itself, to my Mother Earth, and also to my connection to all of creation. And so I think I would encourage each of you to establish what your relationship is to the land and what your connection to the place that you're living in is. So what does it mean to you to be outside and experience nature in the way that I'm experiencing it right now? What do you feel and think and listen to or move through when you're outside? So it's important to think about those things and to think about the caretakers of these lands as well. Right now I'm on Mohawk territory, but just outside of this community and heading towards what is now known as Kingston, it was shared territory between many groups. So the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat people shared these lands. And so we give our greetings and thanks to them for taking on that role and that responsibility, and we recognize that they're the true caretakers of these lands. But we also think about what it means to share these lands and what it means to share all of us to share in connection and in relationship with each other. So I really encourage you to think about that and what that means for you, and to explore and get out on the land as much as possible and really enjoy, cherish, and love these lands and take care of them, and they'll take care of you as well. Yawagoa, thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Linda Colgan, and I would like to introduce you to, welcome you to Science Rendezvous Kingston's very special webinar for educators about our new wonderful kits that are going to be available through the Education Library at the Faculty of Education at Queen's, and also through the Miller Museum and through the internet. So we have lots of opportunities here. And I just wanted to let you know that this webinar is going to be recorded, and we will have this webinar up and running on our digital space by Monday, so that anybody who could not attend today can still have an opportunity to learn from Lindsay about these kits and about how they can be used in the classroom. And I am going to ask that if you have questions, that you would please enter them into the Q&A box that is at the bottom of your screen. If you scroll down, you'll see Q&A. And what is going to happen is that Lindsay is going to answer those questions at the end of the webinar. And at this point, I would like to introduce Brenda Reed, who is the head librarian at the Faculty of Education. Brenda has been an important part of Science Rendezvous for a very long time. Brenda compiles all of the book lists that we share daily that have a number of books in English and French for readers of all ages to complement our content. We're very grateful for Brenda's assistance here, and we are so grateful, Brenda, that you are going to be the one to introduce our special guest, Lindsay, to thank her and to manage all the questions. So Brenda, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda, and welcome everyone. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome and introduce our speaker, the author and lead researcher on the Pleistocene Extinction Kit Project scientist, author, and popular guest speaker, Dr. Lindsay Carmichael. As teachers and readers, you likely already know Lindsay as the L.E. Carmichael, who has written more than 20 books for children and young adults, including her recent award-winning title, The Boreal Forest. The library's copy signed out, so I'm so pleased you have it there, Lindsay. I suspect that every school library across Canada now shares this beautiful information book with teachers and classes who are learning about the world's largest biome. In addition to the Boreal Forest, Lindsay has written on topics ranging from animal migration and communication, to reducing agricultural pollution, to gene therapy, hybrid and electric vehicles, several books on forensics, and more topics in health and science. Lindsay has written primarily for primary grade audiences up to young adults, and in the comprehensive, beautifully formatted teacher guides that accompany each kit that you will hear about this afternoon, you will see that Lindsay is also a brilliant creator of hands-on activities with the capacity to write crystal clear explanations of complex topics. So how did an aspiring children's author also become a scientist? Well, fortunately for us, Lindsay realized by the time that she left high school that when setting out to be an author, it is often helpful to have a backup plan. So she headed to the University of Alberta, where she completed a PhD on the genetics of northern wolves and Arctic foxes. Lindsay's research interest was focused on the science that underlies forensic technology. And her dissertation, Ecological Genetics of Northern Wolves and Arctic Foxes, was awarded the Governor General's Medal for Academic Excellence. Lindsay's highly successful move from award-winning scholarly writing to award-winning creative writing for children has made her a much sought-after author for science information books. Lindsay's deep sense of wonder and curiosity make her an ideal author for children, and I love that when asked about her unusual career path, she explains that scientists tell stories every day. We call them hypotheses. We are so fortunate to have such a brilliant forensic scientist writing inspiring and engaging books on science topics for children, and most especially lucky that Lindsay connected with Linda, Peter May, and the team who created the Pleistocene kits, because Lindsay's scientific background combined with her creativity, her need to know the why of things, and her sense of awe have made these kits a truly unique contribution to science education in Canada. I know that you're going to thoroughly enjoy hearing directly from one of the lead creators of these kits this afternoon, and I'm excited to hear Lindsay talk about her work and how the kits can be used in schools. So I'll turn the screen over to Lindsay now, and we can hear her thoughts on how to use these resources. Welcome, Lindsay.
Wow, thank you, Brenda. That was an absolutely incredible introduction. And I am so grateful we are recording this webinar, because I am going to play that back to myself every time that I have one of those days where I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing, which happens more often than you would think. It does make me sound incredibly fancy. So I'm hoping that the presentation that I have prepared will live up to those expectations that Brenda has just set for us. So hello and welcome to all of the teachers and educators that are attending this webinar today, and also to those of you who are watching it on demand on your own time. I'm so glad that you are here. I'm so excited to have the next hour to geek out over paleontology with all of you. Thank you so much for tuning in and for your interest in bringing these resources into your classroom. So yes, I am Lindsay. I'm not sure if you could see me earlier. So since Brenda didn't have a copy, I will just show you one of my books. I'm very proud of it. It's won awards, and it's so, so pretty. Thank you, José Bissayon, for your gorgeous illustrations that make me look, again, much fancier than I actually am in real life. I'm also the author of a number of educational resources that you may or may not be aware of, including the Million Tree Project Resource Guide. This is available in print and also online at the Science Rendezvous website. It is free, and it has all kinds of fabulous information on trees and forests and why they matter for the environment in general and in the time of climate change in particular. So you may wish to check that out. And last year, I also worked with Linda's team on the production of WATA teachings, which is a really wonderful resource I was honored to be a part of, because it presents the science and the traditional knowledge of the sugar maple side by side. So having a chance to learn about Indigenous traditional knowledge of these trees while researching the science was a really great experience for me. And that's another digital resource that you can access for free and bring into your classroom anytime you like. Linda can answer more questions on that when we get to the end. As Linda mentioned, because we are recording this presentation today, I'm going to go straight on through, and then we'll do all of the Q&A at the end. So please do drop those questions in the Q&A box if you have them as we're going along. And let us dig into the thing we are all here for today, which is the paleontology teaching kits, beginning with the Pleistocene extinction kits. So the Pleistocene extinction teaching kits are the first 2 kits in a 6-volume series that we are working on. They will be available to borrow very, very soon. And 2 more kits will be dropping next year in 23, with the final 2 kits arriving in 2024. So stay tuned for those, and we can discuss the topics we'll be covering on those later on in the Q&A if you like. But for now, I'm just going to focus on the Pleistocene extinction. So first of all, what are the goals of this project and of these kits? Well, we wanted to use the interdisciplinary science of paleontology to foster students' curiosity and love of STEM. If they learn something, that's a bonus. But my goal as a science writer and as a science communicator is really just to get them interested, just to get them understanding that science is cool and relevant and important. And if they happen to absorb some facts along the way, that's even better. We also wanted to ensure that all students could have access to a museum experience, regardless of where they happen to live or the resources that are available to their family or to the school that they happen to attend. A lot of kids are lucky enough to get to go to science centers and museums, either from home or on field trips, but a lot of kids aren't, maybe because they're in remote schools or because the school just doesn't have the resources. And this is a way of sort of bridging that gap, of allowing you to bring some of these really incredible resources directly to your students and ensuring that everybody gets a chance to experience these great relics of the past. So we are bringing those museum quality specimens into the classroom for students to engage with. We are building all 6 kits around high interest, highly relevant topics and examples. We're going to captivate kids with things they're already interested in, and we'll sneak the learning in under the radar. And we're going to create opportunities for independent inquiry, for experiential learning, for a really deep and meaningful exploration of some of these critical concepts in STEM, giving kids a chance to really flex that creativity and ask their questions and discover things that they never knew about before. So those are the goals. They're fairly lofty, so we had to have the right team involved in the project. I am the researcher, I am the chief nerd. I am the author of the teacher's guides, which I will be showing you in just a few moments. The project is spearheaded by Linda Colgan, who is a mathematician and an education professor, so she knows her stuff. And she has wonderful, big, brilliant ideas all the time that we are thrilled to be working with her on. All of the content in the kits has been vetted by paleontologists. One of our paleontologists is actually in the session today. So hi, Linda. We have 2 Lindas on the project. We have also had the content vetted by classroom teachers to give us some feedback on whether these activities that we are planning are actually feasible and how they're going to work in the classroom with actual students. And there is Indigenous content woven throughout the kit as well. So we made sure to have Indigenous education specialists checking over those sections to ensure that we were being respectful of any issues pertaining to Indigenous peoples and their participation or exploitation in paleontology. So now that you know a little bit about our goals and who has been involved in the creation of these resources, let's talk about the kits themselves. First and most important, these kits are free for educators across Canada to borrow. We're going to go over the borrowing instructions later, but I just wanted to start out by making that clear. There is no cost to bring these resources into your classroom. I know budgets are tight, and we wanted to make this accessible again to everyone. Second, you need to know that there are 2 kits that focus on climate change and the Pleistocene extinction. There is a junior edition that is most appropriate for grades 4 to 6, and it addresses core concepts like habitat, evolution and adaptations, biodiversity and classification systems, food chains, energy pyramids, competition, climate change, and extinction. There is also a senior edition of this kit, which is best for grades 7 to 12. It's going to go into all of those same core topics in greater detail, but it's also going to address some bonus topics like trophic cascades, heredity and ancient DNA technology, de-extinction technology and the bioethics of that, and the difference between correlation and causation. If you have read the news in the last 2 years, or really at any time during your life as an adult human, you will know that the concepts of correlation and causation are often very unclear. And if that is the only thing that students learn while they are playing with the fossils, I will be happy because it's a very, very important concept and we need people to understand the difference between those things. So that is covered in the senior edition of these kits. In addition to addressing these curriculum concepts, the kits are going to help your kids build critical skills as well, particularly critical thinking skills. Throughout the kits, kids are going to be asked to evaluate evidence. They're going to be asked to think about the strengths and weaknesses of different forms of evidence and decide how much weight they should place on those different forms of evidence, using multiple lines of evidence to draw conclusions, and expanding their knowledge to new scenarios as well. So we're giving them information, but we're asking them to apply it and to use their imagination and use their thinking skills to figure out how this relates to other animals or other time periods. So again, we're looking at building that scientific mindset, that science literacy, that curiosity, and that sense of inquiry. So now comes the fun part. Now comes show and tell. So I'm going to walk you through the contents of the physical kits, and we will talk about the digital edition in a little while. First of all, we're going to begin with the teacher's guide itself. So this is the teacher's guide for the junior edition of the kit, the 4 to 6 edition. You will see that it is rather thick. There is a reason for that. I have designed and delivered many courses in various roles through my work as a graduate student, as a PhD person, as a scientist, as a author. I don't even know all the things I've done, but I understand exactly how hard it is to prep new lessons because I've been there. And we wanted to make sure that everything you needed to know to feel confident in presenting this information to your students was right here in the book. There are further reading sections in the back. Brenda helped us compile a bunch of resources that are wonderful and that you can go to if you want to, but it's not necessary. Everything that's necessary is in this book. The goal of that is to make your life as easy as possible. You read the book, you prep your lesson, and off you go. So the guide itself is divided into modules that are subdivided into concepts and activities. So the complete table of contents is going to be in your handout, which I will send out after the webinar today. So you don't need to worry about capturing this information or writing it all down. I just wanted to quickly review with you some of the things that you will find in the modules that are in the junior edition. There's a general introduction for you as the instructor, and then there's an introductory module for your students. And that is going to give them some foundational information about the Pleistocene. What is the Ice Age? When did it happen? What's the connection between the water cycle and these great big glaciers? How do all of those things fit together? Just to ensure that all the kids are on the same page, they understand the vocabulary, they know what we're talking about before we get into the good stuff. There's a module on herbivores of the Pleistocene. Then there's a module on carnivores. And then the final module is on extinction, climate change, and the applications of the Pleistocene extinction to things that are happening in our environment today, which is where the relevancy comes in, right? Paleontology is cool, we all know that, but why does it matter? because it tells us a lot about how the earth and habitats have changed in the past, and that helps us predict what might happen in the future. So that's going to be really helpful for your kids. The junior edition is broken up into nice little chunks and nuggets where there's some information and then there's an activity for the kids to do so that the short attention spans are not getting bored. There's always something interesting going on for them. And the modules from 1 to 4 are scaffolded. So they're starting out with things that are a little bit more basic and then moving up to more complicated concepts as we go. That being said, we wanted to make this kit as flexible and as easy for you to use as possible. So you don't have to start at the beginning and work your way all the way through the book. You can pick and choose the things that are going to be most appropriate for the group of kids that you're working with, or you can pick and choose depending on how much time you've got to devote to this unit. So things can be pulled out and used independently, as well as this nice arc from start to finish, depending on what's going to work best for you. Now, I know what you really came here for is the fossils, so I'm going to show you some of those now. The kit contains museum quality casts of real fossil specimens. These were very generously donated to us by Peter May and his team at Research Casting International. RCI builds fossils for museums all over the world. They are some of the best in the business, and we are so grateful to have them working with us on this project because they have given us the best toys. Now, while these kits are, or these fossils are casts and they're real, they are meant to be touched. They're not just meant to be looked at, okay? So feel free to give them to your kids, let them move them around, let them examine them, get their hands on them. It's meant to be a hands-on experience. I'm going to show you each one, and I will highlight some of the cool features of each. We're going to start with this guy. Actually, let's go like this. This is the upper jaw of a steppe bison. Now, the steppe bison had up to 1 meter between the tips of its horns. So the entire skull is far too big to actually be included in the kit. That's why we have only given you the teeth. I'm going to hold this a little closer to the camera so you can see the detail there. You can actually feel the ridges and the texture on that fossil. It's incredibly detailed. And by looking at those teeth and those ridges, your students are going to be able to understand how that adaptation relates to the food that the animal was eating. Steppe bisons, of course, were herbivores, and they were actually generalists. So they were eating grasses and herbs, but also harder foods like twigs and branches, which is why they've got strong teeth with those ridges for grinding things down. While we're on the subject of animals that are too big to include in a box, this is one tooth. This is the molar of a mammoth. It is, in fact, bigger than my head. And it's quite heavy. I think this might actually be the heaviest fossil that we have in the kit. It's really incredible, the weight of this thing. This is another animal that, of course, is a herbivore and lived in similar habitats to those steppe bison. And it was also a grazer. So you can actually see, it almost looks like a flight of stairs. Sorry, you'd think after 2 years of this, I'd be better at manipulating objects in front of my camera, but no, I'm still just flopping around out here like I have no idea what I'm doing. But check that out. Check out the ridges on that. And just the size of the mammoth molar. Unbelievable. I can't get over it. So that's a mammoth. Again, a grazer grinding down the grasses and the herbs. We have also got the molar of a mastodon. This one is from an animal that was a little bit smaller. It's not quite as big as the mammoth that I just showed you. And you can also see that it is a completely different type of tooth. It's the same tooth, it's a molar, but it's a completely different type of tooth. So even though mammoths and mastodons look a lot alike on the outside, they were actually very different animals living in completely different habitats, eating completely different kinds of food. So the mastodons were browsers and they like to eat branches pine cones, other things that are hard and need to be crushed using these giant cusps on their teeth. And if the camera is working for us, you can actually see the texture on the surface of the tooth and the wear facets, where chewing on these really, really hard foods has actually worn down the surface of the tooth. There's an activity in the teacher's guide that gets kids to look at those wear marks and to do some math involving wear marks and to think about what the presence of wear marks on this molar might tell us about the diet that the animal was eating. So again, we're connecting those adaptations to the habitat and the diet of the animal and how it was actually behaving in the environment. So Mastodon, very awesome. The next one might look a little bit familiar to, well, Canadians. That is the skull of the North American beaver, the Canadian beaver, Castor canadensis. So this is a modern beaver, but I say modern with a grain of salt here because these guys actually did live during the Pleistocene. The modern beaver did not go extinct at the end of the Ice Age. They actually survived that extinction event and have persisted and are living in swamps and wetlands all over North America today. Actually, the beaver was living in the swamp and wetland of the boreal forest, so right next door to the mastodon. So the nice thing about the skull is that it's in two pieces. So just as it would be in the animal, there's a mandible, a lower jaw, and then the top of the skull, right? So that's going to allow your students to actually pick it up, take it apart, look at all of the cool detail again on the surface of those teeth, have a nice close look at how sharp the incisors are because they've been worn down in the process of chewing on all of those branches. The reason that we have included a beaver that is still alive is because it is such a dramatic contrast to this beaver. And yes, I am looking at you through the gap in its teeth because how cool is this? Look at these teeth. This is the skull of a giant beaver. And I'm very sad that they're extinct because I just can't get over how awesome they are. So this critter was about 6 times the size of the modern beaver, about the size of a black bear, if you want something a little more concrete. Lived in the same habitats, in fact, often shared lakes with the smaller beavers. And they could do that because even though their teeth are very similar, as you can see, they were actually eating different foods. So the North American beaver was eating wood, just as they do today. These guys were eating water plants like cattails and water lilies. And we know that from stable isotope analysis, which is not covered in the junior edition of the kit because it's a little bit more technical, but it is in the senior edition. And there are some activities where your students will be looking at graphs of stable isotope analysis in the bones of the extinct animals and figuring out what they were actually eating based on that, that analysis. We could talk more about that later if you have questions about it. This hole, by the way, this gap that I'm looking at you through, this is called a diastema. That is the gap in the jaw where teeth that are no longer adaptive for the animal have actually stopped growing. So beavers don't actually need the teeth in there. But if you are the kind of beaver that likes to cut down trees, having that space in your mouth is actually quite handy. One of my favorites, the giant beaver. Okay. So those are the herbivores that are included in the kit. We have to have the carnivores too. And one of the carnivores that we have got is everybody's favorite, perhaps the most iconic species of the Ice Age, the saber-toothed cat. Now I say cat because they're not closely related to modern tigers. They are in the cat family, but they're not actually tigers. So this is the skull of the saber-toothed cat. The first thing that I noticed, the very first time I saw these fossils, is that it's the same size as the giant beaver, which again just goes to show you how ridiculously huge the beaver was. It was the same size as the saber-tooth cat, but not quite as mean. So that beaver was eating plants. The saber-tooth obviously was a predator. It's also super cool, and this is something that we ask kids to do as one of the suggested activities, that even though they both have these long curving teeth, on the beaver, it's the incisors. On the saber-tooth, it's the canines. So it's a similar adaptation, but it's a totally different tooth in a different location in the mouth, designed for a different purpose. You can feel the edge on the back of that tooth, the cutting edge. It's not sharp enough to actually cut. No safety concerns here. I'm rubbing it. I'm totally fine. No blood. See, all good. But you can actually feel the texture of the serrations on the back of that tooth, which is really amazing. In case you're wondering about the color, all of the fossils that are in this kit are from animals that did live in Canada during the Pleistocene, but this particular specimen did not come from Canada. This is one of the fossils from the Rancho La Brea tar sands in California. And the reason that the fossil is dark is because it was basically sitting around in oil for thousands of years, and the stain soaked into the bone. Yeah, so that's why the beaver is white, and the saber-tooth has this lovely dark patina on it. I've got one more skull to show you, and it is this guy, the direwolf. And I'll tell you now that one of the biggest research challenges I had while working on the teacher's guide was trying to find pictures online of direwolves that were not from Game of Thrones or Dungeons and Dragons. Who knew that it was going to be so challenging to find a scientific drawing of a direwolf? But it really, really was, because apparently they have invaded pop culture in ways that are not at all scientifically accurate. This is the skull of an actual direwolf, one that really lived during the Pleistocene. Again, you can see by the color that it came from the same Rancho La Brea deposit, this particular individual, although they have been found in Canada as well. This skull is cool because you can see this tooth right here. This is the first molar, also called the carnassial in a carnivore, because it has these special blades. Let's see if I can hold that up, for slicing the meat. And that particular tooth is so much bigger than the tooth of any other dog-like species that it's diagnostic for a direwolf. That's one of the ways that paleontologists recognize them. The other thing that's really cool is this ridge on the top of the skull. That's called the sagittal crest. And it is one of the places that the muscle that works the jawbone actually anchors. So in the kit, there's an activity where we have kids feeling the top of their own heads to feel for the sagittal crest. You can't feel it on a human skull, at least not on mine, because the size of that crest indicates the size of the muscle, which is an indicator of how strong the bite was. And this was clearly a predator with a very strong bite that could take down quite large prey with those really strong jaws, much stronger than human jaws at any rate. In the junior edition of the kit, we also have the front foot of the direwolf. So you can see the claws on the ends of the toes there. All of the bones in the foot have been glued together so that they won't fall apart and get lost. So that's nice and sturdy, as they have also been on the front foot of the saber-tooth. So you might not have been able to tell from the skulls because they both kind of take up the whole frame, but by comparing the size of the feet, you can really see the difference in the size between these two predators. And the size relates to things like social living and hunting strategy, which is something that we discuss in the kit as well. I will say, however, that my very, very favorite thing, perhaps in the entire kit, other than the giant beaver, is the toes of this fossil. So let me, again, try and get it nice and close to the camera so you can kind of see. On the distal phalange, or the end toe bone, to be less Latin for you today, It's hollow. That's where the claws go when the cat retracts its claws. I have a cat. She's almost 20. I have known for a very long time about retractable claws, but I'd never seen the bones before. And it blew my mind to actually see the hole in the toe where the claw would go when it's pulled in. So if that amazes me, and I'm a professional science person, just think how amazed your kids are going to be when they take a look at that. It's just so cool. So cool. Okay. That's the end of fossil show and tell, but there's still more stuff in the kit. So we have provided some color laminated copies of figures that are in the print teacher's guide. Yes, you are looking at a horse apple right now. It's relevant, it's science, I swear. There's a section in the junior teacher's guide about Pleistocene poop, coprolites, and how they relate to digestive adaptations and how those digestive adaptations might relate to extinction risk. These color laminated copies of figures are meant to be passed out to your kids as they are doing their group work or they're discussing or whatever it is that they're doing, so that they can actually look at some of the things up close and personal. We have also included magnifying glasses that are going to help them get a closer look at the details on each of those fossil casts, like, for example, the wear marks on the surface of the mastodon tooth. Some of the activities that are suggested in the teacher's guide will require additional materials, but they are things like rulers, protractors, scissors, string, craft paper, things that most schools do tend to have as part of their normal complement of supplies. Anything that's unusual, we tried to put right in the kit itself so that you wouldn't have to source that on your own. But just be aware that there are some activities that do require regular school supplies also if you want to do those activities. Okay, that's the junior kit. The senior kit is very similar in a lot of ways, but there are a few differences that I wanted to draw to your attention. So the first thing is the senior edition of the teacher's guide. Again, it's a big book. We wanted to include everything that you were going to need to feel like you knew what you were talking about and you were ready to go and present these materials in a very confident way. This book is organized a little bit differently on the assumption that older students are going to have longer attention spans. So instead of those short little chunks of information broken up with activities, there's a backgrounder section that gives you all of the information that would be the basis of your lecture. And then there's a very lengthy list of classroom activity suggestions, where you can, again, pick and choose between which activities you want to assign to the kids. I should mention as well that in addition to the hands-on activities where the kids are actually working with the fossils, there are extension activities in both of these kits that suggest topics for further research, either in the library or online, so that kids can extend that learning on topics that they're interested in. The senior edition has 6 modules instead of 4. The first one is, again, introduction and a crash course on mammalian tooth anatomy and fossils. That's going to give your students the grounding in the vocabulary that's used throughout the kit so that when I say incisor versus canine, they actually know which tooth I'm talking about, right? Then there's the herbivore module, the carnivore module, and then there's a module on ancient DNA. I am a geneticist by training. I was not going to write about the Pleistocene and not talk about ancient DNA. It was mandatory. That being said, the ancient DNA module does assume that your students have a basic understanding of Mendelian genetics. So grades 9 and up are my recommendation. Please know that if you are working with grades 7 and 8, you can lift that module right out of the teacher's guide, skip over it. It will not make a difference. You can still do 5 and 6 without going into that content. So totally up to you. Module 5 is on the Pleistocene extinction. We've actually got your students debating between 2 competing hypotheses as to why that extinction occurred. Was it overkill by human hunters, or was it climate and habitat change at the end of the Ice Age, or perhaps both? Life is usually more complicated than one or the other, right? And the final module is on the Anthropocene, the time period we're living in now when human beings are having a very significant impact on the environment and on wild species. And it's taking a much deeper look at the parallels between the Pleistocene and what's happening in the environment today and possible solutions for those kinds of issues, those modern day conservation issues. When it comes to the fossils, all of the teeth and all of the skulls that I showed you are included in the senior edition of this kit. The feet are not. The senior students will be doing DNA instead of feet. Just be aware of that. There are some additional supplementary materials in the senior edition of the kit that you should be aware of. Again, there are going to be magnifying glasses, and there are going to be those laminated copies of figures that your students are going to want to use, including this painting by William Stout. Which is absolutely stunning, and I love it so much. It's just beautiful, and it really shows this concept of competition and trophic cascades and the differences in size and weaponry of our two predators, the direwolf and the sabertooth. The senior kit also includes 2 3D puzzles, the Mammoth and it's a cow. It's a bit of a letdown. I'm sorry. This company does not make a bison puzzle. The cow was the closest I could get, but that's okay because cows and bison are both ruminants. Mammoths are not. So again, this is going to tie into that concept of digestive adaptations and how that relates to nutrition and how that relates to extinction risk when your preferred foods start to disappear because your habitat is changing. The senior kit contains a replica of a Clovis spear point. The Clovis people were the basis of the original overkill hypothesis that your kids will be debating in Module 5. And there are 2 children's books in the senior kit as well. Bringing Back the Wolves, which will be very helpful when you start talking about trophic cascades. And this book, Super Crocs and Monster Wings, which the students do not use directly, but is really cool and has a lot of good information that relates to many of the topics that are covered in the kit. The reason that we put this book in the kit is because it's out of print. So your school library tech will probably not be able to get a copy of this for you if it's not already in the library. While we're on the subject of library resources, again, the back of the teacher's guide has extensive further reading lists compiled by our fabulous librarian, Brenda Reed. And some of those include resources for students as well as for teachers. So if something catches your eye, check with your library tech or check with Brenda and the Education Library at Queen's to see if you can get your hands on that for use with this unit. Okay. I am hoping that at this point in the presentation, everyone who is here today is saying, this is amazing. How do I get my hands on it? Again, the kits are free. Okay, you can borrow this for free, bring it into your classroom, absolutely no charge. Hopefully that will help you convince your administrators that it is worth the time to do this. The physical kits with all the fossils are packed in pelican cases, like this one that you can see behind me here. They have wheels, they have handles on both ends. When it's fully packed, the kit weighs about 46 pounds, so about the same as your suitcase if you're headed off for an all-inclusive vacation for a couple weeks. So the weight is not really an issue, but as you can see, the box is kind of big. So I would recommend an SUV or a truck, and if you bring someone to help you lift it, that's just going to make your life a whole lot easier. The kits will be listed in the Queen's Education Library catalog. You will be able to go to the library catalog online, find the kit, put in a hold request, come on down to Kingston and pick it up. And then you'll just bring it back to the library when you're done, okay? If you don't have a week 2 weeks, 3 weeks to devote to this unit, that's okay. You can still give your kids a chance to explore these resources because the Miller Museum is going to be offering hands-on workshops that are using these kits as well. The curator, Linda Suji, I believe, is in our workshop today, and she will be the person to ask if you have questions about field trips to the Miller Museum and the use of these kits for a day. Some of you might be saying, I don't live in Kingston, what do I do? Don't worry, we got you covered. Again, the goal of this project was to give as many children as possible the chance to experience these fossils, which means that we have a digital edition that is available for you as well, that is also free to borrow. So I am going to hop onto screen sharing here for a moment. And hopefully, if all has gone well, you are now looking at the landing page for the junior level teacher's guide. So the digital format is the teacher's guide. So it is assuming that you as the instructor are actually using this resource. There will be some times when you may want to give your kids access to it so that they can work with it directly as well. That'll be up to you. I just want to show you some of the features of the teacher's guide in the digital format so that you get a sense for how it actually works. So here on the landing page, we begin with an acknowledgement. This is not just a land acknowledgement, but it's an acknowledgement of the complex and sometimes troubled history of Indigenous people in the field of paleontology, both the contributions that Indigenous people have made and some of the exploitation that has taken place. And those are some of the themes that come up through the Indigenous content, activities, and discussion questions that we've included in the teacher's guide. The full table of contents is here, so nice and easy to navigate in and out. You can check any section you want. When you select a particular section, that table of contents stays visible for you, which is nice for navigation. You can see we've got some introductory text here. We have all of the graphics and figures that are part of the printed manuals here online as well. And our graphic designers are brilliant. They've done a wonderful job of making both the print and the digital edition clean and easy to navigate and beautiful to look at. You get down to the bottom, nice button to skip ahead to the next section. And I wanted to point out these words that are highlighted in blue as well. In the digital version, those reference these little pop-up boxes. In the printed edition of the guide, they're in the margins. So these are going to cue you towards on-page definitions or just super cool random facts that you need to know about because I found them in my research and I had to tell someone. You don't want to know what it's like in my house when I'm researching a new project. My poor husband, it's like every 5 minutes, honey, guess what I just read? Anyway, some of that stuff made it in here for you as well. I hope you enjoy it. There is a glossary at the end of these teacher's guides as well, but we wanted to make sure that some of the more technical vocabulary was defined right there on the page to, again, make your life as easy as we can. So how does that hands-on component actually work in a digital space? Well, Research Casting has provided us with interactive 3D models. They are so cool. I'm going to scroll on down here to, again, everyone's favorite, the Sabertooth tiger, and I will show you how these actually work. So there's a scan of the mandible, the lower jaw, and then there's a scan of the top of the skull. So when you select it, it's going to take a moment to load. And then you can actually pop it into full screen. And when you're working with it, all you have to do is click and hold with your mouse, and then you can drag it to any position that you want. It is 3D and it's 360 degrees. I will warn you now, there's a bit of a knack to manipulating these scans. It takes a little bit of practice. I'm not that great at it yet. You may wish to experiment before you attempt to do this in front of your class. But once you get in there and you figure out how to move it around, you can also zoom in, and you can see the level of detail that has actually transferred from that physical cast into this digital image. It's unbelievable. If we line up on the nasal cavity here and zoom in a little more, you can actually see all of that texture inside the sinuses of the Sabertooth cat. It's amazing. I love it. Now, that being said, there are certain things that we haven't figured out how to translate from the physical world into the digital world, or that we simply can't because of copyright reasons. We can't put the 3D puzzles online for you because we don't own them. We purchased them from a company. We can't give you copies of the ebooks. You're going to have to work with your librarians if you wanted to use those children's books as part of your lesson. And we should let you know as well that we are still sort of tweaking some of the language in the digital version of the teacher's guide, because there will be references to page numbers. If you're checking it out now, we're going to go through, we're going to smooth all that out. We're still sort of working out the kinks in that print to digital transition. But please be assured that there are so many activities suggested in these teacher's guides that there will be tons and tons and tons of things that your kids can do just using those 3D scans of those fossils, and they're going to have a great experience no matter which version of the kit you are using. Also be aware that if you have borrowed the physical kit and you want to show your kids some of the images and the figures that are in the teacher's guide, you can always hop on to the digital edition and you can just pull up the relevant image and use your smartboard or your overhead projector to share that with your class as well. So just because you've got the physical one doesn't mean you can't use the digital as a supplement. Feel free to go back and forth between them in whatever way is useful for you. The links to those digital guides are going to be included in the handout that I send you later on today, so you can start to explore them right away if you want. Again, just note that if things are changing, it's because we are refining as we go here. And I think that brings me to the end of all of the things I was planning on saying. I've kind of talked your ear off, I know. I want to thank you all so much for being here today, our live audience. Thank you for taking the time on this glorious, glorious, beautiful day outside. And to all of those watching this recording, I hope that you're going to have a fantastic experience using these kits in the classroom. I am going to open this up for questions. If anybody would like to ask me anything, now is your chance. And I believe, oh, here comes Brenda. She's going to moderate our Q&A for us.
Thank you, Lindsay. You surpassed that introduction. I had not seen the contents of the kit before. Amazing. That is just so astonishing. You have one lovely comment in the chat from Brittany who says, you said it before, but I love that this is literally bringing the museum and inquiry fun to the classroom. I'm sold, Brittany says.
Oh, fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that.
So folks, do put any questions that you have in the Q&A, and you've got Lindsay's rapt attention here to help you with using these amazing kits in your classrooms.
Lindsay, it's Linda. Lindsay, can you tell us a little bit about the workshop you did with 40 kids on Saturday and what their reactions were to using these specimens and the materials?
Oh, it was amazing. I'll be honest, it was the first time that I have been in front of a room full of children since the pandemic began. I've been doing all of my author visits virtually, and I was out of practice and I had no idea how it was going to go, but it was amazing. The minute we got them setting up their Ice Age the Meltdown experiments, where they were using Play-Doh to simulate land, water, and ice cubes to figure out how sea level changes depending on whether the sea ice or the land-based ice sheets are melting, they were into it. They were building land. And then we passed out the fossils and they were just laser focused. We gave them all field notebooks to record their I notice, I wonder lists or anything else that they happened to be seeing that they were really excited about. And we had kids filling up the entire notebook as they were looking at one fossil after another. We had a young paleontologist who was using non-standard measurements on the saber-tooth skull. We have a fabulous photograph of him using his fist to measure the hole where the eye socket is in the saber-tooth skull. They were asking brilliant questions, and it was just so encouraging to see kids that were hungry to discover and to explore and to pick stuff up and look at it and like wiggle the teeth and just, oh, it was so much fun. I was good for nothing afterwards. I was totally exhausted the next day, but the kids were into it, and that was just wonderful to see.
Well, again, I think one of the reasons that we have been committed to doing these kits is the fact that in Western Canada, there are some kits because of the fact that there are dinosaurs and there are a lot of fossils in Alberta and in British Columbia. But once you get out of that geographic area, there aren't really any resources for bringing this material alive for children. And one of the things we wanted to do was make sure that we had an opportunity to inspire children who may not be so attracted to things like coding or other kinds of focus in the STEM curriculum right now, but still have a real interest in an interdisciplinary field like paleontology that involves biology, that involves geology, that involves all of these areas. And again, we know that not all families are able to make trips to the museums where these things are. So NSERC was very, very gracious in its funding to allow us to create such amazing resources and then offer them at absolutely no cost. So we're hoping that, you know, the people who are here today will spread the word to as many people as possible so that these resources, physical and digital, are borrowed as much as they possibly can be.
So Linda and Lindsay, Brittany does have a question related to the borrowing and learning about the resources. So as sold as I am, Brittany says, I'm in Nova Scotia and getting the physical kit is therefore impossible. Is it possible to do a virtual connection with someone for the kiddos to at least see real fossils and have someone discuss them? I feel like that would be a great segue and great reminders when the 3D models are then used, or to see it virtually with a presenter while exploring the 3D models. We want you with the kit, Lindsay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say, one of the things that we would love to do, we're hoping that a number of the teacher candidates at the Faculty of Education at Queen's University take these kits out with them when they're doing their practicum or when they're doing their teaching. And wouldn't it be lovely if we could partner a teacher candidate using the kids in a classroom with your classroom in Nova Scotia? That would be absolutely amazing and wonderful. I will say that Peter May from Research Casting International does have a number of connections in Nova Scotia. And so depending on how popular the kits are, how much they're used, there may be ways also down the road of getting other copies of these physical kits into smaller local museums across the country. That was a conversation we were having this morning. We just haven't got there yet, but we will, Brittany, we will try to partner you with somebody, and we will try to make sure that that happens. I will say that we are going to include in the kit the video recording of today's workshop with Lindsay. We're also going to include an amazing, amazing webinar from yesterday that Cala Carbone, who is a research assistant at Queen's University, working in the paleontology area, working in geology, working at the Miller Museum. Cala took us from the field where they were trying to extract a huge skull, and it took 8 people, I think. Cala, I may be wrong on this, but I think you said 8 people, 6 weeks to get it out. So she took us from the field all the way to cleaning, to preparing, to displaying all of these fossils. And I think, based on yesterday's webinar, that that would be a strong introduction to just show the kids at the beginning so that they understand where these specimens came from as well. So those will also get a link in our digital kit. So Brittany, as I say, Lindsay's going to be in touch with you after this to give you the handout. And from there, please keep the conversation flowing, and we will be back and be in touch with us so that we can see how we can help you. Okay.
Yeah, Brittany really likes the idea of the physical kits in Nova Scotia. So maybe that will be reality down the road.
Maybe. And is there another question, or?
There is not another question.
Okay, well, there we go. So I guess, Brenda,
I will just finish up by thanking you, Lindsay, for such an amazing, inspiring tour through the goals of the project and the contents of the kits. I had no idea what the contents of the kits really look like. And especially for all the time you've devoted over the past couple of years to developing the lesson plans and writing the teacher guides, your introduction really conveyed how much careful thought and planning went into this work. The fossils are amazing. The molar of the mammoth is, as you said, just astonishing. Thank you for answering the questions and following up with Brittany.
And I'm just going to ask, Lindsay, can you tell the audience what you're working on now for the next 2 kits?
Yes, thank you, Linda. That was the thought that had just popped into my head as Brenda was speaking. So right now I am wrapping up the research for the kits that will release next year. They are going to take a deeper dive into evolution. And I use the word dive deliberately because we are looking at great transformations of vertebrate bodies that allowed animals to colonize new niches. So we are going to look at fish coming out onto land, becoming tetrapods for the first time. By the way, that was in the Devonian era, and I just watched The Creature from the Black Lagoon, which is also about the Devonian era. So that'll be going in the kit as one of those cool bonus facts, because how geeky and awesome is that? So after we do the tetrapods, we're going to look at dinosaurs growing wings and learning to fly and become birds. We are going to look at mammals who lived on land, giving up their feet and growing flippers instead as the whales go back into the water. And I've just been wrapping up some research on the evolution of technology that has allowed humans to colonize the niche of outer space. So that is very exciting. I'm going to be starting my first drafts next week. The final series of kits for 2024 is going to be on geological time. And I think we're going to be looking at that through the lens of mass extinctions. The Pleistocene extinction was actually quite a minor extinction, even though we lost a lot of animals that we all know and love. But the mass extinctions were something else entirely. And that's going to let us get into some fossils of completely bizarre creatures like trilobites and the critters in the Burgess Shale, and more dinosaurs, because everyone needs more dinosaurs. So we're still sort of working out what we're going to focus on there, but many exciting things are coming in the next couple of years. So stay tuned for those.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Okay. I think unless anybody else has any questions, it looks like we're ready to wrap it up.
Right.
All right.
What a wonderful way to spend an afternoon. Lindsay, thank you again. And I know everybody's waiting to get something in their mailbox, their inbox from you.
I will send it today.
All right. Thanks very much, Lindsay. And thank you, Brenda, for hosting.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Brenda.